Somto, in her wedding dress, sits on the floor, tears streaming down her face. Her stepmother and stepsisters rush to her side. Her husband, Ikenna, is nowhere to be found. Guests whisper, "Tufiakwa, she's cursed, just like her mother." Once upon a time in a village, there lived a meek man named Obinna. He had two beautiful wives, Adana and Ifeoma. Ifeoma was a very nice person, loved by everyone in the village. She had a daughter named Emanuela. 8 years passed, and Ifeoma could no longer bear children, which saddened her deeply. Obinna's family pressured him to marry a second wife, but he bluntly refused. One day, Obinna's mother visited them in town. Obinna and Ifeoma were delighted to see her, as it had been a long time since they last met in person. "Momsy, you are welcome. How was your trip?" Ifeoma happily asked as she stretched her hand to take her mother-in-law's luggage. The older woman replied coldly, "I will be fine when you give my son grandchildren, not just a grandchild." Obinna insisted that his mother should let Ifeoma help with the luggage, assuring her that they would have more children in God's own time. Hurt by her mother-in-law's words, Ifeoma retreated to her room, crying. Throughout her stay, Obinna's mother made life difficult for Ifeoma, complaining about everything she did and refusing to eat her food or speak to her. The pressure on Obinna to take a second wife intensified. He tried to resist, telling his mother, "Mama, I love my wife so much. Women like this are rare, and God has blessed us with an intelligent and hard-working daughter. We are a happy family." But his mother persisted. "We want more grandchildren, a full house. Obinna, we want more." Ifeoma, not wanting to cause enmity between mother and son, begged Obinna to listen to his mother. Reluctantly, Obinna married Adana, whom his mother had introduced. At first, Adana seemed nice, but she soon showed her true colors. Adana bore Obinna 3 children, 2 girls and 1 boy. They were badly raised, as Adana wouldn't let anyone scold them when they misbehaved. The children were overly pampered, leaving Ifeoma's daughter to do all the household chores. Tragedy struck when Obinna and Ifeoma traveled to a nearby community for a friend's traditional marriage. On their way home, they had a ghastly accident, and both lost their lives. Ifeoma's daughter, now called Somto, was left in the care of her wicked stepmother and step-siblings. Somto's life became miserable. She was treated like a maid in her own father's house, forced to stop going to school, and not allowed to visit anyone. She did all the chores and was fed leftovers once a day. Her stepmother and step-siblings were incredibly cruel to her. As Somto grew up, she blossomed into a beautiful young woman, attracting wealthy suitors from different communities. However, her wicked stepmother would always chase away her suitors, saying awful things about Somto to them, and sometimes even presenting her daughters instead. One day, while fetching water from the stream, Somto almost slipped. A poor-looking man grabbed her, preventing her from falling. He was dressed in ragged clothes and looked as if he hadn't eaten for days. They exchanged pleasantries, and he walked Somto back to her house. The man was touched by Somto's kindness, as no one had ever treated him so well. This poor-looking man was a plantain seller in the local market. He decided to investigate Somto's situation and eventually concluded that he wanted to marry her. He thought, since her stepmother won't let her marry a wealthy man, she might accept a poor plantain seller like me. Somto and the plantain seller grew close. She would often stop by his stall when she went to the market, spending time with him. However, she refused to let him visit her home because of her evil stepmother. One day, a wealthy man came to ask for Somto's hand in marriage. The stepmother, scheming as always, asked Somto to prepare food for the potential in-laws. When the food was ready, the evil stepmother secretly added an excessive amount of pepper. When the visitors tasted the food, they screamed in pain, their eyes turning red. They angrily left the house, accusing Somto of trying to harm their son. Heartbroken, Somto confided in the plantain seller about everything she had been going through. He listened with a heavy heart, as he had grown to care for her deeply and had been waiting for the right time to propose. Finally, the plantain seller visited Somto's family to ask for her hand in marriage. Adana laughed at the sight of the poor man, but thought to herself, "This poor man can have her. It's no loss to me. This is the kind of person she should get married to." So she accepted on Somto's behalf. Despite their apparent poverty, Somto admired the plantain seller for his kindness and love. On the wedding day, the plantain seller couldn't afford to buy drinks or provide food for the guests. Somto's stepmother and step-siblings laughed at them, mocking, "How can you take care of her when you can't even buy a common drink?" The newly wedded couple left in shame as the plantain seller took his bride to his home, which was far from the village. To Somto's surprise, they didn't stop at a small hut as she had expected. Instead, they arrived at a grand mansion with beautiful trees and people bustling about. They sat at a luxurious dining table laden with a variety of meals. Somto looked around in shock, unable to comprehend what was happening. The plantain seller turned to her and said, "I am sorry, my lady. I must reveal the truth to you now. I am a very wealthy man who disguised himself to find a true bride who would cherish me for who I am, not for what I have." Somto and her husband lived peacefully and loved each other deeply. Meanwhile, Adana's family faced numerous troubles. Her 2 daughters were sent away from their husbands' homes due to laziness and poor behavior, with one being heavily pregnant. Her son was arrested by the king for stealing from an old woman. Adana's children brought her constant pain and worry. One day, Adana's pregnant daughter went into a complicated labor, requiring expensive medical care and blood transfusions. Desperate, Adana begged the doctor for help, only to discover that the doctor was none other than Somto, with her husband by her side. Without hesitation, Somto and her husband offered their help, covering all expenses and providing the necessary blood. This act of kindness saved both mother and child. Moved by Somto's generosity, Adana and her children sought forgiveness for their past cruelty. Somto, with her compassionate heart, forgave them all. She even offered Adana's son a job, giving him a chance to reform. A year later, Somto gave birth to twin girls, bringing joy to the entire family. To celebrate their love and a new beginning, Somto's husband decided to renew their marriage vows. Adana, unsatisfied with her current situation, began pressuring Ikenna, Somto's husband, to buy her a house and a car. She threatened to withhold her motherly blessings if her demands weren't met. As the pressure mounted, Somto, ever the peacemaker, intervened and promised her stepmother that after their marriage renewal ceremony, they would get her the car. This placation, however, only served to anger Adana further. Consumed by jealousy and greed, Adana hatched a sinister plan with her 2 daughters to destroy Somto's happy home. They saw the upcoming wedding renewal ceremony as the perfect opportunity to strike. On the day of the wedding, the atmosphere was festive. Somto and Ikenna had thrown a grand party, inviting the entire village, including Adana and her children. The air was filled with music, laughter, and however, when the time came for the marriage proposal renewal, Ikenna was nowhere to be found. Panic set in as guests searched for the groom. Somto's heart sank, tears rolling down her cheeks as her beloved husband remained missing. His phone was unreachable, and there was no trace of him. In a cruel twist of fate, Adana and her daughters, the architects of this disaster, consoled Somto with false sympathy. The joyous party ended on a somber note, with whispers and worried glances replacing the earlier merriment. In the days that followed, Somto's world crumbled around her. She discovered that their bank accounts had been frozen, and to her horror, learned that Ikenna had been arrested for drug trafficking. Their beautiful home, once a symbol of their success and happiness, was seized. As days turned into weeks, Somto found herself struggling to provide for herself and her twin girls. With no other option, she swallowed her pride and returned to her stepmother's place, hoping for shelter and support. However, after a long and tiring journey, she was met with cruel rejection. Adana and her sisters, labeled Somto as unlucky and cursed, laughing at her misfortune. The stark contrast of her life, from a poor girl to a rich woman and back to destitution, seemed like a cruel joke of fate. In her hour of need, it was her grandmother who opened her doors to Somto and the children. 6 months into this new, challenging life, Somto received a call from an unknown number. The caller sent her a video that made her eyes widen in shock. The contents of the video were damning evidence of the truth behind Ikena's arrest. Without wasting a moment, Somto rushed to the police station with this new information. The evidence led to a swift resolution. Ikena was released from jail, their property returned, and in a twist of poetic justice, Adana and her daughters were arrested. Under questioning, they confessed to planting drugs in the mansion the day before the wedding, revealing the depths of their jealousy and malice. As the truth came to light, Somto and Ikena were reunited.
Lesson from this story. True character is revealed in times of adversity. While some may betray you out of jealousy or greed, there are always those who will stand by you through thick and thin. Stay true to your values, have faith in justice, and never underestimate the power of love and perseverance to overcome even the darkest of times. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment below for more engaging stories.